Good morning, Year 8. Welcome to your lesson with me today. You can hear my disconnected voice coming at you through YouTube. Guys, I'm hoping by now lovely Chelsea's given out the pink books and we're ready to begin. So let's open up our books and put our title in, Roald Dahl, Tales of the Unexpected, and it's the 20th of July. Okay, so the teacher, whoever that lovely person in the room with you is today, can just press pause and give you about 30 seconds to a minute to write down that our title is Roald Dahl, Tales of the Unexpected, 20th of July. Now, we've got our mastery review. This is where we're just connecting back to our learning from last week. So I'm going to ask you in silence and on your own to make your choices. So number 1, if something is connected with strange things and death, is it macabre or irreverent? So write down number 1, macabre or irreverent. You choose. Okay, if something's connected with strange things and death, which is the word, macabre or irreverent? Number 2, if something's not being taken seriously, is it macabre or irreverent? So if something's not taken seriously, if we're making a joke of something, is it macabre or irreverent? Okay, for number 3, we're going to answer true or false. Explicit information means you have to work out what something means. Is that a true definition of explicit information or false? Okay, good. Hopefully you've made your choice. Number 4, foreshadowing uses implicit information, the word but, and word choices to reveal ideas. Is that true or is that false? And number 5, true or false? The old lady in The Landlady was a typical fiendish murderer. Do you think that's a true statement or a false statement? Now, absolutely, the teacher, lovely person in the room with you, can press pause at this moment to give you just a minute or two to make sure you've got a word written down for each answer. Okay, off you go. Right, brilliant. So hopefully the teacher's pressed play again now, and we're just going to go through those answers together. So if something is connected with strange things and death, it's macabre. So Roald Dahl is a macabre writer because he writes about death, but often in a strange and unusual way. He even likes to use those words queer, strange, peculiar in his writing because he finds life strange and unusual. Okay, number 2, if something's not taken seriously, it's irreverent. So Roald Dahl is also an irreverent writer. He doesn't take death too seriously. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, playful in the way that he tells these stories. He does it in an irreverent way. Brilliant. 3, explicit information means you have to work out what something means. Well, that's false, isn't it? It's implicit information where you're working out what things mean. Explicit means it's really obvious. You can't deny it. That's your answer. Okay, brilliant. Now, foreshadowing uses implicit information, the word but, and word choices to reveal ideas. That's absolutely true. That's the conclusion we came to last lesson. Brilliant. And I'm hoping for number 5, you all agreed that this is a false description. The old lady in The Landlady is not your typical fiendish, wicked murderer. She's not like Jack the Ripper, is she? She's not like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where that evil just comes out in a brutal, violent way. Yes, she does a terrible, wicked thing, but she comes across as kind and warm and welcoming. She's not what we would expect at all. Brilliant. So guys, we're going to look at some of these ideas today, played out in a news story. So as you're just writing down our big question for today, how does Dahl foreshadow what's to come in a news story? You're going to be given our copies or the copies of the news story. Okay, our news story is one of my favourites by Roald Dahl. It's called Lamb to the Slaughter. Now, if the teacher just needs to press pause here to allow you to write down your question and to give out the materials, that's absolutely the power of the pause, their moment to do so. Then we're going to look at the opening of the story together. So guys, we're going to be thinking about this news story in terms of our key areas. Can we spot and respond to implicit information and explicit ideas? Can we spot any buts that change direction? What about the writer's word choices that make characters seem innocent? So how does the writer set us up and then take us in a new direction? So we're going to read the opening of the story. You've got it now in front of you and I'm going to read it to you. We're going to do a quick check-in activity with the explicit information to check that you understand what's happening, but we'll do that in a minute once we've read the story. So, are we ready? Are we sitting comfortably? The room was warm and clean, the curtains drawn, the 2 table lamps alight, hers and the one by the empty chair opposite. On the sideboard behind her, 2 tall glasses, soda water, whiskey, fresh ice cubes in the thermos bucket. Mary Maloney was waiting for her husband to come home from work. Now and again she would glance up at the clock, but without anxiety, merely to please herself with the thought that each minute gone by made it nearer the time when he would come. There was a slow, smiling air about her and about everything she did. The drop of her head as she bent over her sewing was curiously tranquil. Her skin, for this was her 6th month with child, had acquired a wonderful translucent quality. The mouth was soft, and the eyes, with their new placid look, seemed larger, darker than before. When the clock said 10 minutes to 5, she began to listen, and a few moments later, punctually as always, she heard the tyres on the gravel outside and the car door slamming, the footsteps passing the window, the key turning in the lock. She laid aside her sewing, stood up, and went forward to kiss him as he came in. Okay, so that's our story opening. That's how it begins. Now, guys, I want you to write the numbers 1 to 8 in your books. And I'm going to read you 8 statements. You can actually see they're on the screen in front of us. So if we need to in a minute, we can pause. But I'm going to read them to you first. Now, as I read each statement to you, decide, based on what's in front of you in the story, whether it's T, a true statement, or F, a false statement. Now, guys, all you need to record at this stage is either T or an F, a true or a false. Okay, and a little hint, there will be 4 true statements. So number 1, the room was warm and clean. True or false? The room was warm and clean. Number 2, there were 2 glasses. Is that true or false? Number 3, Mary is waiting for a phone call. Is that true or false? 4, Mary is watching the clock anxiously. True or false? 5, Mary is 6 months pregnant. Is that true or false? 6, her husband arrives on time at 4:50. 7, Mary turns off the TV. 8, Mary waits in her chair for him to kiss her. So guys, I'm just going to allow the teacher to judge. If you need a minute or 2 minutes just to double check and make sure you've got a true or false for each statement. Okay, and then we'll look at the answers together. So, as we go through our answers, remember we're looking for explicit information. If it's true, we'll be able to prove it with the information in the text. So, 4 true statements. So, here are true statements. We're going to go through each one. Give yourself a tick if you're right, but if not, just listen to the explanation if you got it wrong. So, number 1, the room was warm and clean. There it is, up on that top line, the room was warm and clean. Brilliant, explicitly stated. We can say that's true. Number 2 is true. There were 2 glasses. Here it is in that opening paragraph still. We've got 2 glasses. So this opening paragraph is all about setting the scene, locating us in a living room, which is all well looked after. There's lamps, there's a drink ready to go. Number 3, Mary is waiting for a phone call. Well, she's not waiting for a phone call. That's a false statement. She's waiting for her husband to come home. So this new paragraph, we go from setting where our character is to introducing who they are, Mary Maloney. And she's waiting for her husband to come home. Dutiful housewife, waiting for her husband to come home. Mary is watching the clock anxiously. Now, this one's a little bit harder because Mary is glancing up at the clock. Can you see it? So she is watching the clock, looking at the clock. But there's our but without anxiety. So she's not anxious. So that's not a true statement. It's a false statement. Okay, so that's about checking information carefully. So that would be false. But 5 is true. Mary is 6 months pregnant. And it says down here this was her 6th month with child. So lovely Mary is waiting for her husband. She's prepared the room, so she's a good housewife. The room is warm and clean. She's got 2 glasses ready for them both when he gets in. And she's 6 months pregnant. The perfect image of a housewife. Now it says here her husband arrives on time at 4:50. Now this is true, but it's a bit naughty because it says when the clock said 10 to 5, so that would be 4:50. So I hope you spotted it as a truth statement. Now number 7, Mary turns off the TV. Well, Mary isn't watching TV. There's no mention of a TV in this living room, which might help us think that this is a time before TV. So we're back in history a bit, maybe the 1940s, 50s. Or that women wouldn't watch TV. Instead, what's she doing? She's sewing. Okay, so Mary, typical, beautiful, lovely housewife. Pregnant, tick, waiting for her husband. So Tick, a good housewife. The house is clean. She's well looked after it. She's sewing. So a lovely image of the domestic goddess is our Mary. Now 8, Mary waits in her chair for him to kiss her. Well, actually, no. Look at how this passage ends. She lays aside her sewing. She stands up. She goes forward to kiss him. She's ready to greet her husband in a warm and affectionate way. She loves him. She's warm and affectionate. So brilliant. I hope you got those marked. Now, we're just going to also think about 2 word choices here, and it's going to help us do a little summary statement about the beginning of this story and how Mary seems. So far, our true statements are proving that Mary's pregnant. She's waiting, but she's not worried about her husband. She's ready for his return. So let's think about these words, tranquil. So it says here that she is curiously tranquil. So as she's sewing, she's curiously tranquil, which means she's calm and peaceful. Later, it describes her as being placid, that it says that she has a placid look. Okay, so her eyes are placid. In other words, now that she's pregnant, she's calm and peaceful. She's not easily upset or excited. So if we're putting those ideas together, who are these words describing? Who is tranquil and placid? Just say the answer. 3, 2, 1. The answer is Mary. So hold that idea. That's going to help us in a minute. So she's not easily upset or excited. She's calm and peaceful. Now, would you say that these 2 word choices, are they similar or different? Are you getting the sense that tranquil and placid means similar things or different things? So your answer is in 3, 2, 1? Yes, brilliant. They're similar, aren't they? So is the writer building an idea with these words, or is he choosing 2 different words to take us in different directions? Is this a building moment or a different direction moment? Brilliant. So the writer is building this sense that Mary is a particular type of person. She's calm, she's peaceful, she's not easily upset or excited. Probably because she's pregnant, she's keeping herself very calm and relaxed. Okay, so we're going to use those ideas and some of our statements here just to give us a sentence about Mary. So it says here, in the beginning, Mary sings. So guys, I'm going to ask the teacher in the room just to press pause to give you a minute to put those ideas together to complete that sentence. So we might say, in your own words, so in the beginning, Mary seems calm and peaceful. She's a good wife waiting for her husband to come home. In the beginning, Mary seems like a typical housewife. She's pregnant, she's waiting for her husband to come home, and she's very calm and peaceful. Okay, so if the teacher could just press pause and get that sentence completed. Brilliant. So hopefully we've all got this clear impression of Mary as this typical quiet housewife, very calm and peaceful, tranquil and placid, with child, almost like the image of like that idyllic kind of domestic pregnant goddess that we used to get from the 1950s. So what happens next in the story? Now, you can see there's a little clue in a minute. We're going to summarize this section by explaining what the writer makes it clear. In other words, how is Mary feeling about her husband? How does she relate to her husband? Okay, so be ready that whilst you listen to me read the story that you can answer that in a minute. Hello, darling, she said. Hello, darling, he answered. She took his coat and hung it on the closet. Then she walked over and made the drinks, a strongish one for him, a weak one for herself, and soon she was back again in her chair with the sewing, and he in the other opposite, holding the tall glass with both hands, rocking it so the ice cubes tinkled against the side. For her, this was always a blissful time of day. She knew he didn't want to speak much until the first drink was finished, and she on her side was content to sit quietly, enjoying his company after the long hours alone in the house. She loved to luxuriate in the presence of this man, and to feel, almost as a sunbather feels the sun, that warm male glow that came out of him to her when they were alone together. She loved him for the way he sat loosely in a chair, for the way he came in a door or moved slowly across the room with long strides. She loved the intent, far look in his eyes when they rested on her, the funny shape of the mouth, and especially the way he remained silent about his tiredness, sitting still with himself until the whiskey had taken some of it away. So guys, how does Mary relate to her husband? What does the writer make really clear here about Mary and how she thinks and feels about her husband? So, 3, 2, 1, and I want you to say it out loud, and then we're going to turn it into a sentence. So, how does Mary feel about her husband? In 3, 2, 1, Mary. Good. I hope you were saying she loves him, she cares for him, She worships him. I wonder if any of you got that. But she really does see her husband as the sun, the center of her world. Mary loves him. She idealizes him. She feels and thinks only of him. So we're going to use those ideas just to complete that sentence. So we're going to press pause now, just for a minute, and you're going to write, next, the writer makes it clear that Mary loves her husband, that Mary worships her husband, that Mary adores her husband. Your choice of words, your 2 minutes to write that sentence. 3, 2, 1, go. Right, so hopefully the lovely teacher in the room paused that long enough to give you a minute or two to finish that sentence. Wonderful. So what is going to happen? So far, it feels like this is a romance, doesn't it? A lovely story about a woman who loves her husband and is about to have a baby. What could possibly go wrong? Tired, darling? Yes, he said, I'm tired. And as he spoke, he did an unusual thing. Now, guys, as I'm reading this section to you, you'll see I've already drawn attention to certain elements by using this red. And as I'm reading, I want you to think about what he's drinking and how his drinking changes and why that could foreshadow something bad, okay? So listen to me read, and then we're going to think about this drinking detail, okay? As he spoke, he did an unusual thing. He lifted his glass and drained it in one swallow, although there was still half of it, at least half of it left. She wasn't really watching him, but she knew what he'd done because she heard the ice cubes falling back against the bottom of the empty glass when he lowered his arm. He paused a moment, leaning forward in the chair. Then he got up and went slowly over to fetch himself another. I'll get it, she cried, jumping up. Sit down, he said. When he came back, she noticed that the new drink was dark amber with a quantity of whiskey in it. Darling, shall I get your slippers? No. She watched him as he began to sip the dark yellow drink, and she could see the little oily swells in the liquid because it was so strong. I think it's a shame, she said, that when a policeman gets to be as senior as you, they keep him walking about on his feet all day long. So we get this lovely moment where we start to get the foreshadowing. And this is a lovely new way that we foreshadow. The writer draws our attention to a seemingly small detail, an insignificant detail, a character having a drink, but he does something with that detail that really starts to hint that something bad's coming. Now, guys, as we think about these red words, I want you to think, I know there is one adult in the room with you, and as young, under 18, but this is a common image that we do see in stories and films. So why may he be drinking and drinking more in this moment? And it's an unusual thing. It's an unusual thing. He drained it in one swallow. So he downs his drink, guys. Why has he downed his drink? Why does he quickly get an empty glass? He's downed his drink and then goes to get himself another one. Why has he gone for 2 quick drinks? Also, why has he made the second drink dark? Why has he made it stronger? In other words, he's got more whiskey and less soda water, so he's got less mixer in it. It's almost like he's gone for a neat whiskey. Why is he drinking a big, strong drink at this stage? So guys, let's think about this idea together. Because he may drink 2, it foreshadows that. So why might he be drinking? When we see this moment in films or other stories, why did grown-ups suddenly have a quick, down a quick shot of whiskey? What might it be doing? Now, there's a lovely moment. I don't know if you know the film Saving Private Ryan at the beginning when they're getting ready to land on the beach, on Omaha Beach, and they know it's going to be dangerous, and they cut to different images of soldiers doing things, and one of them is having a drink from a hip flask. I've seen it in moments just before a big fight scene with the grown-ups, and they have a quick drink to steady their nerves. So why do you think Mary Maloney's husband is having 2 drinks on quick succession? What might he be feeling? What might he be using the drink to do? Good. If you're saying things like to give him courage, to steady his nerves. Why might he need courage? Why might he be nervous? What could it foreshadow? What might he be getting ready to do? So guys, I'd love the adult in the room, the lovely teacher with you, to maybe think or see if they've got any ideas about this. Now, we are predicting. It's a foreshadowing moment, which means we're trying to work stuff out for ourselves. We're using the implicit information that he's had 1 drink and then another drink to work out how he's feeling. So because he may drink 2, what might he be drinking to do, these 2 quick drinks? To give himself the nerve to do something, to give himself courage, to steady his nerves. It foreshadows that he might have to do something unpleasant, not very nice. So if the teacher in the room could pause here, and guys, just have a quick, maybe 2-minute discussion and then complete that sentence for me. Because he may drink too, it foreshadows that he. Off you go. Okay, so he's drinking. What's going to happen next in the story? So it foreshadows a change in the tone of the story, that something bad's may be coming. He didn't answer, so she bent her head again and went on with her sewing. But each time he lifted the drink to his lips, she heard the ice cubes clinking against the side of the glass. Darling, she said, would you like me to go and get you some cheese? I haven't made any supper because it's Thursday. No, he said. Well, if you're too tired to eat out, she went on, it's still not too late. There's plenty of meat and stuff in the freezer, and you can have it right here and not even move out of the chair. Her eyes waited on him for an answer, a smile, a little nod, but he made no sign. Well, anyway, she went, I'll get you some cheese and crackers first. I don't want it, he said. She moved uneasily in her chair, the large eyes still watching his face. But you must eat. I'll fix it anyway, and then you can have it or not, as you like. She stood up and placed her sewing on the table by the lamp. Sit down, he said. Just for a minute. Sit down. It wasn't till then that she began to get frightened. Go on, he said. Sit down. So we've got this lovely moment where we've introduced the drink, the motif, the small insignificant detail to foreshadow something bad is coming. And even our character Mary's picked up on it. She's uneasy, and now it says that she's frightened. But what is going to happen? She lowered herself back slowly into the chair, watching him all the time with those large, bewildered eyes. He'd finished the second drink and was staring down into the glass, frowning. Listen, he said, I've got something to tell you. What is it, darling? What's the matter? He had now become absolutely motionless, and he kept his head down so that the light from the lamp beside him fell across the upper part of his face, leaving the chin and the mouth in shadow. She noticed there was a little muscle moving near the corner of his eye. This is going to be a bit of a shock to you, I'm afraid, he said, but I've thought about it a good deal, and I've decided the only thing to do is to tell you right away. I hope you won't blame me too much. And he told her. It didn't take long, 4 or 5 minutes at the most, and she sat very still through it all, watching him with a kind of dazed horror as he went further and further away from her with each word. Now, this moment, so he's been drinking to build up the courage to tell her something, and it's going to shock her, and she's in horror when she hears it. So what do we think he's told her? So there it is, he added, and I know it's a kind of bad time to be telling you, but there simply wasn't any other way. Of course, I'll give you money and see you're looked after, but there needn't be any fuss. I hope not anyway. It wouldn't be very good for my job. Her first instinct was not to believe any of it, to reject it all. It occurred to her that perhaps he hadn't even spoken, that she herself had imagined the whole thing. Maybe if she went about her business and acted as though she hadn't been listening, then later, when she sort of woke up again, she might find none of it had ever happened. Now, I love Roald Dahl and hate him at the same time for this moment in this story, because we never actually know the content of this husband's confession. We never know what the it is that he's told her. So it raises 2 questions. It raises the question of, well, why don't we need to know? What's that telling us about the story, that we don't need to know what he's told her? And the other question then, well, what could he have told her? So this is one of those clever moments where the writer really is making us think about what we're reading. No just rolling over us, letting the ideas wash over us. Dahl really wants us to be thinking readers, thinking about the story that he's laying out, adding in our own details, using the implicit information to work it out. He doesn't like lazy readers, Roald Dahl. He likes us to be active and engaged. So the first thing, why don't we need to know? Because obviously it's not the most important thing. If Dahl is saying to us, we don't need to know what the husband's told her, it suggests it's not the most important thing. So it's not the content of what he says, it's just simply the fact that he's told her something terrible and what she's going to react to. However, we can have a bit of fun trying to work out what he could have told her. So in a minute, I'm going to ask the lovely teacher in the room just to let you have about 1 minute, 2 minutes as a group discussion. What could he have told her? Now, this is where we're going to draw upon our knowledge of soap operas. So if you ever watch EastEnders, Coronation Street, Emmerdale, if you ever watch any of our American kind of dramas, what could a husband possibly have told a wife? Yep, that's going to shock her. that leads to him saying, "So there it is, I'll give you money and see you're looked after." What could he have told her? So guys, the truth is we're never going to know, but it's fun sometimes to predict and work it out. So, lovely teacher in the room, if you could press pause and give them about 2 minutes just to put their hands up and come up with some ideas. What has this husband just told her? Let your best soap opera knowledge go to work. Right then, guys, did you come up with some soap opera worthy stories? What's he just told her? Did you get the obvious one, that he's leaving her, that he's had an affair, that he's got another family, that he's running away to join the circus? But it's definitely a confession, isn't it, that she does not want to hear. And the fact that we don't need to know what he says reminds us that Dahl is saying, this is Mary's show. This story is all about Mary, not the husband. Guys, we never even know his name. Did you see that? At this stage, we've never even been told his name. So let's see what impact this confession has on Mary. "I'll get supper," she managed to whisper, and this time he didn't stop her. When she walked across the room, she could feel her feet touching the floor. She couldn't feel anything at all, except a slight nausea and a desire to vomit. So whatever he's told her has made her want to throw up. Everything was automatic now. Down the steps to the cellar, the light switch, the deep freeze, the hand inside the cabinet taking hold of the first object it met. She lifted it out and looked at it. It was wrapped in paper. So she took off the paper and looked at it again. A leg of lamb. All right then, they would have lamb for supper. She carried it upstairs, holding the thin bone end of it with both her hands. And as she went through the living room, she saw him standing over by the window with his back to her. And she stopped. "Oh, for God's sake," he said, hearing her, but not turning around. "Don't make supper for me. I'm going out." At that point, Mary Maloney simply walked up behind him, and without any pause, she swung the big, frozen leg of lamb high in the air and brought it down as hard as she could on the back of his head. She might just as well have hit him with a steel club. She stepped back a pace, waiting, and the funny thing was that he remained standing there for at least 4 or 5 seconds, gently swaying. Then he crashed to the carpet. The violence of the crash, the noise, the small table overturning, helped bring her out of her shock. She came out slowly, feeling cold and surprised, and she stood for a while blinking at the body, still holding the ridiculous piece of meat tight with both hands. "All right," she told herself. "So I've killed him." Were you expecting that? Were you expecting our placid, tranquil, 6-month, gone with child, dutiful housewife to have it in her to do that? She must be really what? What emotion do you think gave her the strength to do that? Anger? Pain? Passion? But she's just committed murder. And the story's not over. So again, what does this story become about? It was extraordinary now, how clear her mind became all of a sudden. She began thinking very fast. As the wife of a detective, she knew quite well what the penalty would be. That was fine. It made no difference to her. In fact, it would be a relief. But on the other hand, what about the child? What were the laws about murderers with unborn children? Did they kill them both, mother and child, or did they wait until the 10th month? What did they do? Mary Maloney didn't know, and she certainly wasn't prepared to take a chance. She carried the meat into the kitchen, placed it in a pan, turned the oven on, and shoved it inside. Then she washed her hands, ran up to the bedroom, and she sat down before the mirror. She tidied her hair, touched up her lips and her face, and she tried a smile. It came out rather peculiar. She tried again. "Hello, Sam," she said brightly, aloud. The voice sounded peculiar too. "I want some potatoes, please, Sam. Yes, and I think a can of peas." That was better. Both the smile and the voice were coming out better now. She rehearsed it several times more. Then she ran downstairs, took her coat, went out the back door, down the garden, into the street. So, guys, this is the turning point in our story. We've hit the murder point early, bang, dead with a piece of lamb. So this story is now going to take us in a new direction. How to get away with murder? Or does she get away with murder? That's the question now that our focus becomes on. Does Mary get away with murder, or does she get caught? So guys, we have to think about her motive. So what's going on inside of Mary's thoughts and thinking. Now, she has 3 questions that we need to understand to get inside her head and her motive. So first of all, what would be the penalty for murder at the time the story is written? Who is she trying to protect and how is she going to protect them? Now, we're going to use these 3 questions to think about today. Okay, and then we're going to see how they pan out, how they take the story in a direction. So what would be the penalty for murder? Now, we're writing, or this story was written at a very different time. Now, if we look at the phrase, did they kill mother and child? Guys, so what's the penalty for murder at the time this story is written? Good, it's the death penalty. So in a minute, you need to write down that the penalty for murder is death. Now, there's a moment when she says that was fine. It would make no difference to her. In fact, it would be a relief. She would almost rather be dead. But something else comes into her head. So who is she trying to protect? Good. She's trying to protect her unborn child. What about the child, she asks herself. So suddenly the story takes us in a different direction. We've got a murderer, a woman who's just killed her husband in cold, passionate blood, hit him on the head with a big piece of lamb. But now she's got to try and protect her child. She's got to try and get away with murder. So how is she going to protect them? So we already see that she begins to do several things. How's she going to protect her child? How's she going to get away with murder? What's the first thing she does? What does she do with the lamb? Yes, she's going to cook it. She puts it in the oven. Very clever. Then what does she do? She goes upstairs and she makes herself presentable. She does her hair, her lips and her face. In other words, she's rehearsing, she's practicing to get away with murder. And then she has this lovely moment in front of the mirror where she rehearses a conversation with somebody. A gentleman called Sam that she's buying potatoes from. Now, if you're going to get away with murder, what do you need? You need an alibi. So an alibi is the excuse, the explanation for where you were when a murder takes place. So we're going to just look at her alibi, and then that's us for today. And then tomorrow we're going to look at when the police turn up, whether she gets away with murder. So it wasn't 6 o'clock yet, and the lights were still on in the grocery shop. "Hello, Sam," she said, brightly smiling at the man behind the counter. "Why, good evening, Mrs. Maloney. How are you?" "Oh, I want some, please, Sam." "Yes, and I think a can of..." "Sorry, I want some potatoes, please, Sam." "Yes, and I think a can of peas." The man turned and reached up behind him on the shelf for the peas. "Patrick's decided he's tired, doesn't want to eat out tonight," she told him. "We usually go out on Thursdays, you know, and now he's caught me without any vegetables in the house." "Then how about the meat, Mrs. Mahoney?" "Oh, no, I've got meat, thanks. I've got a nice leg of lamb from the freezer." "Oh, I don't much like cooking it from frozen, Sam, but I'm taking a chance on it this time. You think it'll be all right?" "Personally," the grocer said, "I don't believe it makes any difference. You want these Idaho potatoes?" "Oh, yes, please. They'll be fine. 2 of those. Anything else?" The grocer cocked his head on the side, looking at her pleasantly. "How about afterwards? What are you going to give for him for desserts? For afterwards, sorry." "Oh, well, what would you suggest, Sam?" The man glanced around his shop. "How about a nice big slice of cheesecake? I know he likes that." "Oh, perfect," she said. "He loves it." And when it was all wrapped and she'd paid, she put on her brightest smile and said, "Thank you, Sam. Good night." "Good night, Mrs. Maloney, and thank you." So, guys, what alibi is she creating? Where's she gone and why's she gone there? So, let's just pause. Okay, and I just want you to answer this question. What does she do to create her alibi? Guys, brilliant. So if you get that she goes to the shop and she sees the grocery man, she does some shopping, she's creating the alibi, the proof that she was out of the house when he got murdered. So our Mary, tranquil, placid, is actually thinking quite cleverly. She's thinking with quite a lot of clarity. Who's she trying to protect? Good, her baby, her unborn child. How's she going to protect them? Well, she has to get away with murder. So guys, thank you for your work today. I look forward to finishing this story with you tomorrow. So make sure you've written down that what she does to create the alibi and make a note of where we've got to in the story. Hope you're enjoying it. See you tomorrow.